Tamashii here. Today I am wearing a Pikachu hoodie, but since my hair is in a ponytail, I've decided not to have the hood up. So you'll just have to deal with that. What I wanted to do today was a list of my favorite Pokemon of each type, which is a really big request that I get a lot, but I don't think it would work very well as like a full weekend video because I've already made a lot of top 10 lists of different Pokemon, so a lot of the ones that are going to be on the list today are going to be ones that I've already talked about in other top 10 lists. So I figured it'd be pretty redundant to do like a full video on it, but since it's such a big request, I figured why not just talk about it a little bit in a unscripted vlog type video. So today that's what I'm going to do. I've already thought of a favorite Pokemon for each type for this video, so hopefully it won't take me that long to get through them all. And I've made sure that if a Pokemon that I like is dual typed, that I don't have repeating Pokemon for each type. Say Carvanha isn't going to be my favorite for both water and dark. So that's what I'm going to do today. There are, let's see, 18 types to get through, so there will be quite a few. I won't spend too much time on each one, and you'll probably already know a lot of them. Sorry I keep looking down. I have my list in front of me. That's what I keep looking at. I am not very good at the whole talking to a camera thing yet. Bear with me. Let's get started. So first up is normal type, and you definitely already know what my favorite normal types are. They're Skitty and Meowth, and because I love cats, there's a Palico over there, and they're my two favorite cat type Pokemon. Meowth is actually responsible for teaching me how to read. If you haven't seen my top 10 Pokemon video, I learned to read from an easy reader that featured Meowth, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, my favorite fire type, to some people's surprise, is still the Charmander line. I know I talked a lot of smack about Charizard in my top 10 overrated Pokemon, and I do think that it is still pretty overrated. But they added the Megas, and I think with the addition of the Megas, it's sort of earned some of its clout back. And even when it didn't have the Megas, I still loved it. I was definitely guilty of contributing to its overratedness because I still loved it regardless, and a lot of people did too. So yeah, Charizard, yeah, sort of a love-hate relationship with Charizard, but I still use one on my team and I still love it to death, so yeah. Favorite fighting type is Heracross. I do like my bug types, and Heracross I think is sort of my definitive bug type favorite. And I kind of don't really like fighting types. I'm not sure what it is. When I think of some of my least favorite Pokemon aesthetically, usually they're fighting types. I think it's just that they're all very humanoid, and that's not really my personal thing. I know a lot of people like that. I just kind of don't. I guess I'm not a people person. But yeah, so don't really dig fighting types, but Heracross I love. My favorite water type is Politoed, actually. This is one that I would probably try and fit into my actual top 10 of all time if I had it to do over now. I've actually looked at it and I've tried to rewrite one, but it's kind of difficult because I love more than 10 Pokemon so much now. So it's like, how do I do this? But yeah, so Politoed. I used one in my White 2 playthrough when I did a Mystery Egg run, and it ended up being like the star of my team. Obviously it was a Drizzlepot Politoed, so the water type team that I ended up with was really built around it, and it ended up being kind of like the star of my team. And it earned the star in PokeStar Studios, so literally it was the star. And I just ended up really falling in love with it, so I think Politoed is a great Pokemon, and being a weather fanatic like I am, it's, you can't really do without a Drizzle Politoed. My favorite flying type is Crobat. I used a team in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that was bred from some of my original 10-year-old Pokemon from my original Gen 3 playthrough. Way back in the day, I still held on to a bunch of them, and I bred them and used their children to play through Omega Ruby with. Well, back in the day I actually had two Crobats named Jacqueline and Carlo, and I always sort of shipped them together in my head, but I never really bred them because they were just such like a cute pair to me. They didn't really work that well together in battle or anything, but they were fun to use together in a team, and I decided to breed them and use their child to play through Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with. And their child was born with a lonely nature, and I thought that was really cute because it was so scared to go to Hoenn and have an adventure all by itself without its mom and dad, but it ended up being a very good Pokemon and evolving and holding its own. And I feel like that was a lot of fun to use. So because of that Crobat, I have become fairly attached to Crobat as a Pokemon. My favorite grass type is Lilligant, and I've already covered Lilligant and how much I love it in my top 10 favorite Pokemon video, and I actually have like almost, I want to say 5 or 6 fully raised Lilligants that I just keep in a collection, and they're all unique with slightly different movesets. I mean, there isn't too much you can do with a Lilligant. It doesn't learn that much stuff. I mean, for coverage you have to give it hidden power, which says something, but I just love using Lilligant. It's a lot of fun. So I've raised a whole bunch of different ones. My favorite poison type, I feel like this is cheating, but my favorite poison type is Venusaur, which is grass poison, and I was never really that big on the Bulbasaur line until I bred a shiny Bulbasaur for my Masuda method tutorial. Since it took me so long to hatch my shiny Bulbasaur, I felt like really like endeared to it by the time I finally got it, because I put in so much work to get it, and it ended up being a really good Pokemon, and it's on my team now that I use like on a regular basis when I do battles and things like that. So, and overall I think Venusaur is just kind of a neat Pokemon. It's also one of my least favorite if you use it in Pokemon Stadium, because I cannot stand its bloodshot eyes, but in any other game Venusaur is okay with me. My favorite electric type is sort of split two ways between Joltik, which is one of the cutest Pokemon on my top 10 cute Pokemon list, and Heliolisk, which is one of my favorite new X and Y Pokemon that was introduced in Gen 6 and was on that top 10 list. Heliolisk was actually the first Pokemon I V-bred for, and I ended up getting a perfect one, but it turns out that its siblings ended up better than it because I needed a specific hidden power for it, and it ended up with a different one, because when you have perfect IVs, you can either only have Dark or Dragon hidden powers, and those aren't that useful. So its siblings with the Ice hidden power ended up a little bit better, but it still holds a special place in my heart for that reason. As a weather maniac, it works well on a rain team, so I do enjoy that. And once again, Joltik is just really cute, and I raised one of those as well. And I just want one for a pet, although I imagine it would probably jack my electricity bill up pretty high because Joltiks live on electricity. My favorite ground type is Claydol. This is one I wanted to put in my top 10 favorite Pokemon list, at least as an honorary mention, but I couldn't think of how to articulate what I like about it. I think it just has a really cool design. I like the idea of it being kind of like an ancient forgotten toy of some child in some ancient civilization, and since I'm very into toys and collecting and all that sort of thing, it sort of fits right in with all the other sort of designs that I like. And it being based around a toy and a doll, which I think is kind of cool. And also, it was just a very unique typing. We hadn't had a ground psychic until then, and I don't think we've had one since. I could be forgetting about something, but yeah, it was a lot of fun to use in Coliseum as well. I think it was Coliseum where you could get one. Might have been XD Gale of Darkness. Either way, it was very useful there. I've just sort of always enjoyed it. My favorite psychic type is Mime Jr. and Mr. Mime. I've already explained why I like these, and also in my top 10 favorite Pokemon list. I often get asked who I would like to have a Mega, and I think Mr. Mime would have a really awesome Mega, because it would just have this, I can just imagine it having this really cool jester look. I think that would be pretty neat. Not that I feel like I have something in mind for it stat-wise or anything, but I think it would just be pretty cool. I mean, since my Marcel, my favorite Mr. Mime ever, is adamant, it would be cool if the Mega somehow made use of physical attack, but it turns out that Marcel, the adamant Mr. Mime, also has a 1 as its attack IV, so it probably wouldn't help it out that much in the end. My favorite rock type is still Nosepass. I do have a fairly weird nose, even now. I mean, I feel like I've grown into it a little bit as I've gotten older, but it's still very strange, and I still get insecure about it a little bit sometimes, but it doesn't bother me too much anymore, and I still feel like Nosepass and even Probopass are some unfairly maligned Pokemon just for the way they look, so I still love them to death, and yeah. My favorite ice type is Articuno, which used to be my favorite legendary overall because I used to use it in Pokemon Stadium as a rental because I didn't really know how to use my own Pokemon for a very long time. But I would use Articuno and I would use Ice Beam on everything, and in Gen 1 it had a very high freeze chance. So I would spam it and freeze everything, and that was my favorite thing to do in Pokemon Stadium aside from the minigames. And aside from being useful for freezing things in Stadium, I've always really liked the way Articuno looked. I thought it was very majestic and romantic almost. How beautiful and big and glittery it was, and it's still one of my favorite legendaries based on aesthetic alone, and it's definitely my favorite ice type. My favorite bug type was kind of tricky because I already used Heracross for fighting. I brought it down to either Ledian or Swadloon, and I recently did a top 10 middle evolutions where I talked about Swadloon and why I like it and the meaning behind its design. And I even recently released a t-shirt based on Swadloon, so if you like Swadloon too, you can check that out in my TeePublic store, and there will be a link in the video description. I've also always really liked Ledian because I raised one in Crystal, and even though it's not the most useful Pokemon in battle, I ended up really enjoying my Crystal team. It had a good mix of Pokemon on it. It was just a really fun playthrough, so I think too, Ladybugs always sort of remind me of my grandmother, and I'm not sure why, because I can't really think of anything except maybe a picture book at her house that reminded me of her that involved ladybugs, but I don't know, they just make me think of her. My favorite dragon type is Sliggoo, and Goodra by extension, but mostly Sliggoo because it's snail-like. I also recently went over that in my top 10 middle evolutions, and it turns out that in the X and Y anime, Ash recently caught a Sliggoo, so that doesn't make me like him anymore, but it's something a lot of people brought to my attention, so good for him, I guess. My favorite ghost type is still Banette, and a lot of people try and convince me that Banette is evil and that it seeks revenge on the kids that threw it away, and a lot of its Pokédex entries do say that. But in my little headcanon, I like to think that it just wants a trainer who will love it, and that's all it really needs to put that aside and move on from it. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but that's just the way I like to think about it. I like to think about all of my favorites as misunderstood. Favorite dark type was also really hard to pick because I used Politoed for my water type, so I couldn't put down Carvanha. But then if I use Carvanha for dark, then I can't put down Absol. So I'm gonna put down Absol and Carvanha for my dark type. And if I had my top 10 list to do over, Absol would probably make it on there now. I never really thought about Absol the way I do now, post anxiety therapy, I guess, with it being the disaster Pokemon and my personal big phobia being natural disasters and the way it relates to animals being able to sense when natural disasters are coming. I just feel like if Absol was real, that would be the best pet for me, because as long as Absol isn't freaking out and warning me of a disaster, then I know that I can relax. Sharpedo and Carvanha are still my favorites because when I was a kid, I tried to release them, and not knowing how the game worked, when it came swimming back, I thought it loved me so much, so it endeared it to me eternally. And I've raised several since then, which have definitely helped cement that for me. I raised one in the same playthrough as my Politoed, and then I recently caught a shiny one using chain fishing, and I also raised one in XD Gale of Darkness, so I have several Sharpedos and Carvanhas that have made it into my personal little Hall of Fame-esque companions. My favorite steel type is either Jirachi or Escavalier, and I hope I'm saying that right because I've never heard anybody actually say Escavalier out loud, and it could be one of those things where it's like, I want to say Braxian, but the letters are actually in a different order, and that's not really its name, so I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. That's just how I say it in my head. Yeah, so Jirachi I like because in Jirachi Wishmaker, it is the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life, and when I had to put it on my top 10 cutest Pokemon list, all I wanted to do was do a montage from that movie of it saying candy, and that's exactly what I did. And for Escavalier, I raised one in the same playthrough where I raised my Lilligant, my original Lilligant Dahlia, and it ended up being the first Pokemon in a long time that I raced to level 100, or among the first. Like those four, the Umbreon, Samurott, Lilligant, and Escavalier from that team ended up being the first Pokemon that I legitimately raced to level 100 in a very long time since my original Charizard Sasha. So if you haven't guessed, a lot of my favorites are based off of Pokemon that I've raised. And coming in at the last spot, Fairy, Florges is no different. I just really like the way Florges looks. I know I don't tend to like humanoid Pokemon, but of them, I think the plant-type humanoids are the prettiest. So there you have it, that is my top Pokemon of each type. I hope this video was satisfying to all the people who requested it, because I do realize that it was very redundant, and maybe not the most interesting way I could have tackled this subject, doing it unscripted, but I just kind of figured doing a full video dedicated to this topic would be kind of difficult, given the fact that I've covered all this before in pretty much every video. I mean, there weren't really too many surprises here, except maybe Claydol and Politoed. I mean, you pretty much already knew most of these, but there you have it, all laid out in a nice little list. If you are interested in buying some of my t-shirts, I have 4 designs in my store now, and I'll probably add another next week, and I think you'll really like them, so please check them out. The link's in the video description. Here's my new title card setup. Works much better than me putting links all over my face, right? So if you want to see last week's unscripted video, which was me and my friend Chaz figuring out who's the best at the Pokemon Stadium minigames, you can click down there. Or if you want to see my last Saturday video, which was a viewer request special, where I tackled your requests such as the one I did in today's video, you can click down there. And as always, don't forget to click there to subscribe for more Pokemon videos twice a week. See ya! Here's my Alto. It's so soft. I actually really don't play very much Monster Hunter. And a lot of people pointed out that my character in Monster Hunter looks like an anime character, and I assure you that's 100% coincidental because I've never seen the show that it's from. I just tried to pick a hairstyle that was most similar to my own, and since I've got fuchsia reddish hair, and it's kind of long, well, it's getting longer, that was the closest thing. And I'm just using the armor that I could make at this point in the game because I'm not very far in.